So your mic is off.
So your voice is not coming.
Sorry, I'm making the same mistake every time.
Okay, sir.
So welcome back. So for the sake of those who were not here yesterday, I'm going to quickly summarize what we have done yesterday, and then we will continue with the lecture. You are able to see my screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we started by looking at what exactly is human learning. And we saw that one aspect of human learning is improvement of performance with experience. We make use of experience to improve our action. And especially, if we make mistakes, we make sure that we don't make the same mistake again. And we acquire knowledge both from other sources as well as by self-discovery. So these are the attributes we give even to machine learning. Machines should be able to learn with experience, adapt their actions, and improve the performance with time. We saw some interesting examples of machine learning. We saw the Boston Dynamics, the robot called Spot, which can do quite interesting and smart things. Then we looked at construction automation, where we can apply machine learning and construction automation, and we brought out the need for automation. We looked at how automation is done in automobile factories. And we thought about whether we can do similar things in construction. I showed this example of a bricklaying robot, which was designed and fabricated by the startup company in Kochi. They developed this robot entirely from scratch. So it shows that if there are creative people who are willing to put in some effort, we will be able to achieve levels of automation which is not seen today in the construction industry. Then I explained, what is involved in developing a control system, an intelligent control system. It needs both hardware and software. So I mentioned about how the hardware works. We have a controller which has a processor, and then we have sensors and we have actuators. The sensors send data to the controller, which is analyzed by a program which you write and upload to the controller, and you take action by sending signals to the output channels. And we saw that there are many places where you can apply intelligent control in the sensing, pre-processing of the data, analysis of data, in the control logic, and in the later stage after you apply the control action to analyze the feedback and make sure that the system learns continuously. So these are some of the applications of machine learning. Then we looked at the broad objectives of machine learning. The main objective is to improve performance with time, and we do it through data. So we saw that this is the primary means of providing feedback. We give training examples, and the system generalizes the data to form general model which can be used for activities in the future. So we saw this example of difference between a conventional program and a learning program. If you write the program, Hello World program, it produces the same output all the time. Now, if you want a different output, probably you need to read data from a data file. And in one of the earlier ideas in the 1970s, people they experimented with what are called as the rule-based expert systems, where in the data file you read the rules, it processes these rules and performs actions according to these rules. We'll come to this idea later on when we go into the details of the algorithm. Then I mentioned that today most of the machine learning techniques work only for well-defined problems. There are a set of well-defined problems where machine learning has been very successful. So these are the three tasks for which we are able to formulate precise mathematical mathematical problems where learning can be achieved. So this is supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. In supervised learning, we have input and output. So we saw this, took this example of regression. You have one column containing the input variables, then the next column containing the output variables. And using the data, we learn a relationship. And for a given input variable, if you don't know the output variable, you can use the model to predict. So you did this example yesterday. And I mentioned that what we did was really search for a hypothesis from a hypothesis space, a set of possible relationship between the input and output variables. And in fact, there are infinite number of possible relationships, but we try to find the simplest relationship that we are familiar with. So this is exactly what you did when you did this exercise, is exactly what a machine does when it performs regression. So I introduced you to this supervised learning task, classification and regression. We saw the example of classification yesterday. In classification, the output variables are class labels. Input variables can be any parameter which determines the class label. And the task is to predict the output, the class label for a given set of values for input variables. We took this example of activity recognition. Let's say we have accelerometers measuring acceleration. And we want to use this data to predict what the worker is doing, whether the worker is idle or working or doing a specific task. So this is a classification problem. So first you train the model using the training data, which consists of set of input variables, in this case, the series of accelerometer readings. And we also need to give the output, this supervised learning. So we also need to provide the output class label. So corresponding to each series, we provide whether the worker is idle or working. So using this data, it learns this relationship, and for in the future, if you have only the accelerometer data, using the model, it can predict whether the worker is idle or working. And then we also looked at this example of image recognition, where the input consists of images, pixel values. If it is in the form of a bitmap, you have the values at each of each pixel, and we input a number of images of the particular equipment we want to recognize. And we also need to provide, in general, negative examples, other images where you don't have the equipment. So the system learns to discriminate between the two classes, the classes of images containing the equipment and images which do not contain the equipment. And once it has learned the model, if we given a new image, it will be able to predict whether there is whether the equipment is present in the image or not. So I showed this example of an automated construction system and the large scale model. And I mentioned that we need machine learning for reliable working of the system, because there are a lot of uncertainties which you cannot anticipate. So this is where we were until now. So now I will move on. We will move on to the next topic called regression. So what I'm doing now is we are looking at the learning tasks. We are not looking at the algorithms at the moment. It will be the next lecture. In the next lecture, we will go deeper into the algorithms and the mathematics. Slightly, we will go slightly into the mathematical details. Again, I don't want to go too much into the mathematical details. We will leave it maybe towards the end of this workshop. Depending on your interest, we will look at some mathematics also. But our objective is mainly to have a qualitative idea of both the tasks as well as the algorithms for performing these tasks. Okay, so we saw the definition of a classification problem. Now we'll see the definition of a regression problem. The regression is also a supervised learning technique. We have in supervised learning, we have set of input variables and set of output variables. In the case of classification, the output variables are class labels, discrete variables, whereas in regression, typically, we have continuous output variables. Output variables are real numbers, continuous values. The objective is to again learn a relationship between the input and output, but the way you formulate the mathematical problem is different for classification and regression, which we'll see later. And the general technique involved in learning is minimize the difference between what is predicted by the model and the value of the output variable in the training data. So there is in general, there is a discrepancy between what the model predicts and what is the actual value in the training data. And we formulate it as an optimization problem where we minimize the error between the error in the predictions. And we find out the values for the model parameters such that the error is the minimum. In general, all these statistical learning methods in machine learning are optimization problems. We have certain model parameters and we want to find the values of model parameters that best fits the training data. A small example. So regression, we use regression mainly in applications where we are not able to create a very accurate mathematical model of the physical phenomena. There are many engineering problems where we are able to do it quite well, but there are also many problems where it's not possible to create a mathematical model from physical principles. We can only develop empirical relationships because there are just too many uncertainties and models become very unreliable. But in such cases, we try to learn from data instead of making use of models based on physical principles. I take a simple example. You have a mobile crane. You must have seen this type of cranes used in construction. So we have at the tip, we have a hoist and cables for lifting the load. And usually these cranes are operated manually. So you have an operator sitting inside this vehicle and there are controls, something like joysticks and pedals for making different movements, for operating the boom, for lifting and so on. Now, imagine you want to automate it. We want just like a robot picks and places objects. We want a crane which can pick and place. You just give the coordinate and it should be able to pick the object and place it where you want it. So we are talking about a robotic crane. So now one important requirement is that we should be able to accurately predict the behavior of the system. And as I said, for many systems, we are not able to create very good mathematical models. So for example, this one, we have cables at the tip, and these cables are not very stiff. So when you lift an object, it tends to oscillate. So the trains have what is called as a swing radius. This example, by the way, taken from the paper. It's not exactly the same data. I made up this data, but this example was taken from the journal paper. So this paper looked at, what is the swing radius of the crane. So when you lift it, it oscillates, and we want to find out how much is that oscillation. And these oscillations can be very dangerous because you could hit other objects or people. So we want to control that. So let us say we know that it is affected by the speed of lifting, how fast you are lifting it, maybe the weight of the object you are lifting, and there might be many other parameters also which affect the swing radius. and we don't know what is the exact model. Now we want to create a model using some data. So you, for example, you can do some experiments, you measure what is the speed, what is the weight, and how much it oscillates, how much it shifts. So you record that and you have this training data, and we want to use this data for making a model which can predict for a given speed and weight, what will be the swing radius. So it's an example of a regression problem. Another example is I give to give you some idea about the complexities we experience in regression. I take a very nonlinear example. This is the load deflection curve of a beam with a nonlinear spring. This is the actual data which one of our students collected in an experiment using fiber reinforced concrete. The beam was made with a notch and apply the load, and you see the deflection. This looks like the stress strain curve, but it's not the stress strain curve, it's the load deflection curve. So deflection is on this axis and load is on this axis. So you can see that in the beginning there is a nearly straight portion, and then you have a very non-linear curve. And you want to predict this. We got this curve by doing some experiment. But let us say we want to create a model with regression. We want to create a model, and we want to predict what is the deflection for a particular load, or for a given the load, what is the deflection. So we want to have this model. So you can see that if you just do a linear regression, people are familiar with linear regression, where you form a linear relationship between the output variable and the input variable. You'll see that it doesn't work very well. It has that linear portion works only in the beginning. But how do you model this part of the curve? You can see that it's a very complex nonlinear curve. This is only in 2-dimension. At least in 2-dimension, we have very efficient ways of interpolating. So we can, for example, you can use piecewise polynomials and interpolate. But what happens if you have hundreds of such variables and it is nonlinear with respect to all the variables? So these are some of the difficult nonlinear regression problems. We'll see how we can handle some of these problems later on. Okay, so we have some exercises to do. So those who were absent yesterday, we are doing a series of exercises, sometimes just to test what you have understood from the lecture, sometimes some thought exercise to generate some ideas. So we will continue with this exercise. So this is the next one. So if you go to this site, I will post it on the chat box. So those who were not here yesterday, so you can click on this link. So this is the exercise 5 we are doing now. So you click on this link to this exercise, and we will discuss the answer once we have the responses. So the first question is fairly straightforward. Can standard linear regression be used to learn the equation? That is the first question, to predict the load from the deflection. Now the next one, you need to think a little bit. How can you separate the curve into different parts that might be approximated by straight line. So spend 1 or 2 minutes, see how you can do this. So the idea is we still want to use linear regression, but one single model will not be able to approximate the entire curve using a linear relationship. So we try to separate it into different parts, and each part might be represented as a straight line. So I'll wait for you to complete this exercise. Okay, let us look at the answer. Others can also complete. So for getting the certificate, you need to complete all the exercises. So just remember that, and at the end of the session, I will stop accepting submissions. So you need to complete it during the workshop itself. Okay. Okay, so let me look at the responses. So what you have come up with. Okay, so the question, can standard linear regression be used? So 47% said yes, 35% no. Yeah, maybe that is a very, the politically correct way of saying, something we can never say for sure, yes or no. So we say maybe. So you can see that the straight answer is it's not straightforward to use linear regression, because you can use, but you'll get large errors. But yeah, how can you separate the curve into different parts? So in general, what I said is, if you just fit a single model to the entire curve, you will not be able to get good accuracy. So how do you separate? Okay, finite element analysis, but this is a situation where we don't want to use finite element analysis. Let's say we want, we don't know, these material properties have a lot of uncertainties. So you don't know what is the yield point. You don't know, you don't know a lot of parameters related to the model. Once we have all these parameters, if you know the material properties, you might be able to do finite element analysis. Shear force, bending moment diagram, all that, work only when you know the shear force. Okay, you can draw the shear force and bending moment diagram, but to get the deflection, you need to get the material properties. And in particular, this is the nonlinear spring. This is not the normal, the Bernoulli beam, which you have learned in engineering. So these are not really that applicable. So we have to use, so what I'm saying is we don't have good mathematical models for modeling this type of phenomenon. So we have to use statistical models. So that is why, we said we have to use some statistical method like linear regression to have so piecewise classification. But my question is, how do you separate it into different ranges? You can maybe separate into linear and non-linear. I think most of you have not read the question properly. My question is, how do you separate it into? Yeah, so here then by slicing it into infinitesimal size, but we don't need that much of level of accuracy. Let me see if anybody has. By plotting, yes, we can do it in 2 dimension, but in general, when you have hundreds of variables, we may not be able to do it. Multiple linear regression intersection points. Okay, this is the closest that is the closest to the correct answer. Yeah, change in slope. This is also possible. You keep looking where there is a change in slope, and whenever the change is significant, you create another model. So there are ways in which you can approximate it. So that is good. You have thought about the problem. I'm not giving you the answer because the answer will come later on when we talk about regression trees. So we will look at that later, but this was an exercise more in thinking about the problem to have some understanding of the problem yourself. It's always more interesting when you come up with the ideas yourself. Okay. Okay, so let us move on. So we saw one important problem, a severe problem with regression, that is nonlinearity. When the relationship between input and output is nonlinear, it is not so straightforward. Later on, when you talk about regression, I'll come back to this idea, how do you handle nonlinearity? There is another problem. It is called multi-collinearity. Standard statistical methods don't work very well when data is collinear. What I mean by collinear, I have illustrated here. So this particular example, this data was made up by me. I prepared this data. I give it in my class on machine learning. So students try to use regression and they will see that you cannot use regression. Regression fails because actually the data is collinear. So I plotted this weight versus speed. So you see that there is a linear relationship between the two input parameters. Here I'm not plotting the input versus output. I'm plotting two input variables, speed and weight. And you see that there is a linear relationship between the input variables. It's not the linear relationship between the input and output variable. Within the input variables, you have a relationship between variables. This phenomenon is called multi-collinearity. So here it is shown in 2 dimensions. You can plot it and you can visualize it. But suppose it happens in multiple dimensions, n dimensions, you have n variables, and there is a relationship among m of the n variables. Now, we'll do another small exercise, that is the next one. This is a brainstorming exercise to understand the concept of multi-collinearity. If the input data is collinear, will linear regression work effectively? So it's a multiple choice question. Yes, no, maybe. What is your answer? Why do you think linear regression will work or will not work? Then next question is, what can be done in the case of input data with multi-collinearity? So this is something you need to think. My idea is you need to think and come up with the answer. These are not simple questions. But once you start thinking, maybe you will discover the correct answer and you will be very satisfied. Even otherwise, you will be able to appreciate the answer better once you have thought about it. So do this exercise and we will discuss after you have finished the exercise. So the first question is, will linear regression work effectively? If it works or if it does not work, what is the answer? What is the reason for that? And if it doesn't work, what can be done in case of data with multicollinearity? Did somebody say something? So we have 40 responses so far. After some more responses, I will go through your answers. Don't be afraid of writing your answers. Yeah, there is no right answer or wrong answer to many of the questions that I'm asking. These are exercises for thinking. What I will look at is whether you have thought about the problem clearly. I won't look at whether your answer is right or wrong. For the best participant award as well as for the certificate for participation, I'm just going to look at whether you have really thought about these exercises properly. Okay, so let us look at some of your answers. Right. So we have not really looked at the details of linear regression. So it is mainly to guess how it works. So it doesn't matter whether your answer is wrong. So some 30% have written yes. 48.5% have guessed correctly. It doesn't work well. And maybe again a political answer. Okay, so the reason for your answer reduces the precision of the estimated coefficients. Okay, let me tell you why it doesn't work. In the next lecture, we are really going into the mathematics, but you will see that finally we want to find a set of coefficients for your variables, and you get a system of linear simultaneous equations. When the data is collinear, you will see that the coefficient matrix becomes singular, so you will not be able to invert that matrix. So this is the mathematical reason why linear regression doesn't work in this case. In general, the coefficient matrix can become singular, but it doesn't become exactly zero. Determinant does not become exactly zero. You can get a very small number which affects the precision of the coefficient. So in a way, what this person has written is correct. It reduces the precision of the estimated coefficient. It becomes clear when we go deeper into the mathematics. Regression needs to avoid covariance. Okay, let me see. There are some answers which are close to what I expected. Okay, so this is the same. For collinear data, regression, linear regression, it's not correct. It doesn't work. The normal ordinary least squares regression. Model will fluctuate a lot. Good, you have been able to think about all this. Not everything is really correct because we really need to understand the mathematics to find out why it doesn't work. Okay, so this is a difficult question. I didn't expect you to answer it correctly because you don't not looked at the mathematics. So let me come back and let me explain why it doesn't work. So this is the example in 2-dimension which I've given. I have two input variables, speed and weight. I'm saying again, this is not the relationship between input and output variable. This is some hidden relationship between among the input variables. So you see that the data lies along a straight line. So that is collinear. Now, my question was why linear regression doesn't work. So I gave you the mathematical reason for that. Why mathematics doesn't work in this case, because the matrix can become singular. But there is a physical reason why it doesn't work. So this is what I wanted you to guess. Maybe somebody has guessed correctly. We have not looked at all the answers, but let me tell you why it doesn't work. So if you look at this data, the data is aligned in this direction. Probably it will pass through all the data points. Maybe there will be a small error. It may not pass exactly through this data point with, there might be small fluctuations. But if you get a new, so this is your training data. You form a model using this data. And suppose your test data is somewhere here. Are you able to see my mouse pointer? Yeah, I think
Yes, sir.
Right. So let us say you get a test point somewhere here. So we said yesterday we said we have two sets of data: the training data and the test data. Training data is what is used for making the model. Test data is for making the prediction. So in the test data, you don't know the output, you know only the input. Let us say we get a test data somewhere here. Now you can see that there are a lot of data points in this direction, so you can interpolate correctly and you can predict what is the output by interpolating between these points which are on this line. But now suppose we get a test point somewhere here. perpendicular to this line. We get a test point at a distance, a certain distance perpendicular to this line. Whether it will be able to predict correctly in that case. So you see that all the data are in this direction. So we know how the data varies, how the output varies in this direction. But in the perpendicular direction, we have no information about how the output variable varies, how the value of the output variable changes as you move in this direction. We don't have that information at all. That data is not available in the training data. So if that data is not available, how is it going to predict? So now what happens is you don't have all the points lying exactly on the straight line. There might be small deviations because of noise. So there might be small differences from the mean line. And because of these differences, there might be some variation in the value of the output variable in the perpendicular direction, which is mostly dictated by the noise. These are not a real relationship, but because of the noise in the data, you have small variations in the perpendicular direction. And if it tries to learn a relationship, it will learn the noise as the relationship between the variables, the output variable and the input variables in this perpendicular direction. So you get the model gets corrupted with noise when the data is collinear. So here you have a small variation, and these if you get a test data point far away from this line, these small variations are magnified. So you get large errors in the prediction when you have collinear data. So this is one big problem with the standard linear regression. And what you should realize is in machine learning, we are looking at problems containing hundreds of variables. And it just happens that many variables are interrelated, which you cannot easily recognize. And we find this problem of singularity everywhere. Whatever data set you take, it is very common that you get this kind of problem, which you don't realize that easily. So if you look at, and in particular, if you look at this, this is an inclined direction. It's not parallel to any of the axes. So if you plot the values of speed, it might follow a normal distribution, a bell curve or a uniform distribution, but you will see that there is some variation along each of these axes, whether you plot the speed or weight. Only if you plot in the perpendicular direction, you will see that there is no variation. So this is a problem, we face when we do regression. So now what can we do in such a case? There is a very reliable method of handling it that is called principal component analysis. If we get time, I will go into the mathematics a little bit. The idea is to identify the direction in which you have maximum variation. So PCA will tell you that all the data have the maximum variation in this direction, and in the perpendicular direction, the variation is very small. You see that the eigenvalues become very small when you do a PCA. So this is one way to handle this kind of multicollinearity in data, which we'll see later if we get time.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Sir, here what we see is only relationship between the input variables, but our objective is output, right? Like we have no way correlated it, but like how can we conclude that the relationship won't be holding good, sir?
Yeah. So, so the fundamental problem is we don't have enough data in a particular direction, right? We don't have any data in this direction. We have all the data aligned in this direction. So we have no idea about what is the variation in data if you move in the perpendicular direction. We don't know how the output variable, the y value changes if you move in this direction. Right?
Okay.
Finally, we want to find out what is the variation of y with respect to these input variables.
Yes.
But in this direction, we have data, so we know what we can predict what is the relationship between input and output when you move in this direction. But when you move in the perpendicular direction, that information is not available in the data set itself.
Okay, sir. Got it.
right? So that is the problem, right?
Okay, got it, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so let us move on. So we looked at qualitatively looked at what is a supervised learning algorithm. Now we look at the next one, that is unsupervised learning. In unsupervised learning, there is no output variable. We don't separate variables into input and output. We just take all the variables as they are. Now the objective is not to find a relationship between input and output. We want to identify trends and patterns in data. We want to make inferences about the data. So it's a process of knowledge discovery. Even regression classification are also knowledge discovery. We are discovering a relationship. But here we are identifying certain trends and pattern, not necessarily relationship between the input and output variable. Again, even in this, we have a definition of a hypothesis space. We saw that the hypothesis space is very important when we try to learn relationship between the input and output. The machine can only find relationship which are in the set of hypotheses. It cannot magically find new relationship. It will only find what you ask it to search for, right? But even in unsupervised learning, we have a definition of a hypothesis space. We'll see that in a short while. So we'll do a small exercise in pattern recognition. So I have shown a set of data points. It could be any parameter. I have not given any name to this parameter. It could be velocity, it could be weight, whatever, depending on the application. You have two parameters. I've shown it in 2 dimensions. We can visualize. In multiple dimensions, we are not even able to visualize, and you're not able to find patterns in the data. But at least in 2 dimensions, we can see some patterns. So I want you to think about it and do the next exercise. Is a descriptive question. How do you describe the pattern you see in the above image? So in unsupervised learning, we want to discover patterns. So I want you to find out how do you describe the pattern which you see in this data in your own words, in natural language. How do you describe it? It's not how you define it mathematically. If you have that information, you can write that. But what I want you to write in English, what is the pattern you see in the above image? So we'll wait for a couple of minutes for everybody to complete this exercise. Okay, let me look at some of your answers. Okay, constantly rising. is a cloud. There is you found a linear relationship that is correct, directly proportional. That is a linear relationship. It's not exponential. I don't think it is an exponential. There is a linear relationship with some clutter. It is with some dispersion. It's not perfectly linear. Yeah, almost a linear pattern. So most of you have recognized. So in 2-dimension, for us, it is easy to visualize and see. But the question is whether we can determine this automatically without a visualization, whether a machine can find this relationship. So most of you have group of points around a 30-degree line, almost a linear pattern. So you are able to describe the pattern which you have seen in the data set. So now this is exactly what a machine should do. We expect a machine to do this in multiple dimension, not in 2-dimension. We want to detect this kind of relationship. It's not a perfect straight line. It's not a crisp linear relationship. It's a linear relationship with some scatter. So this is something we want the machine to do. And the answer to this, how machine can find this, the answer is the same. It is principal component analysis. PCA will tell you exactly which is the direction in which data has the maximum variation. So it will find this vector. This will be the first eigenvector in which you have maximum variation in the data. And the perpendicular direction, that will be the next eigenvector. And the eigenvalue will be slightly less. You will see that eigenvalue represents the variance in the data. So you'll see that the maximum eigenvalue will be for this eigenvector in this direction. So this is one of the statistical techniques for detecting patterns of this form. Let us move on. This is another kind of pattern recognition problem. Identify the number of clusters in the data. I have plotted again 2 parameters, parameter 1, parameter 2. It could be anything. And you have each dot represents one combination of values for parameter 1 and parameter 2. So you have a number of data points. This is a scatter plot of these parameters 1 and 2. Now my question is, are there clusters in this data? And how many clusters are there in this data? So this is the next exercise you will do. Study this figure and answer this next question. How many clusters are in this data? So you have a number of options, 1, 2, 3, 5, and none of the above. So let us see, how you are able to recognize the patterns in this data. This is exactly what a machine is supposed to do in multiple dimensions. Again, in 2 dimensions, we are able to visualize it, but we want the machine to do the same task in multiple dimensions.
Sir, according to me, this is hypothetical because one is connectivity based and the second is the hierarchical based, right? So it is hypothetical because the clarity is if my perception is wrong, so
Right.
might be the
So you
answer
are
is
right. Actually, you are right. Depending on your viewpoint, you can see one cluster, multiple clusters, or no clusters at all. It's
right.
not a well-defined problem. Later on, when we look at the mathematical definition of clustering, you will realize that there is certain amount of subjectivity. This is still a problem. It's a machine learning problem. People are still researching on.
It is like, sir, if somebody shows the Chinese moon and it is on dark side, so you see that it is a moon or it is a day. So
Right.
so we have both the things. So day and moon, both the things. So it is like kind of problems are there in front of us.
Right. So this is a very typical kind of situation where we have as human beings, we see it in different perspective. Depending on our perspective, we have different answers. But machines cannot have this kind of subjectivity. So depending on the parameters you input, will come up with some answer. Right? So there are a lot of cases where we have this problem. Machine does not see exactly what we see because there is some ambiguity in the definition of the problem. Okay, so let us see what are your answers. Okay, so 70% of you have seen 5 clusters in the data. Yeah, there are interesting, you know, some people have seen the 3 clusters. Yeah, none of the above. Probably you mean there is only one cluster. So the clusters are not in general well defined. There are some parameters which determine the number of clusters you identify. And in general, for the standard algorithms, we need to input the number of clusters. That is a parameter which you input to the machine learning algorithm. For example, in k-means, you say identify 2 clusters or 5 clusters, and it will tell you which are the clusters. So the number of parameters, number of clusters is a parameter which you input. It's not. And then, of course, you can experiment with different types of different numbers of clusters and see what works best. Okay, but this is a difficult problem as we discussed just now. So this is another so unsupervised learning task, clustering. The earlier one was identifying this type of linear patterns, which I said you can do using principal component analysis. This is another one. This is a clustering problem. It's also very widely used for a lot of applications, and we'll go into details later on. So to summarize what we said, we have 2 types of learning tasks, supervised learning and unsupervised learning. I've illustrated it here with the example of classification. In supervised learning, in classification problem, we want to learn this line which separates one class from the other. So you have 2 classes and you want to find out what separates the 2 classes. So that is the supervised learning task, where in unsupervised learning, it looks similar, but here we don't have the output variable. You just look at the distribution of points and make inferences about the distribution of points. And we have seen clustering is a method, unsupervised learning method. PCA, I may explain to you. There are other ways, statistical methods, your density estimation. You want to fit a probability distribution to the points. You want to see whether it's a normal distribution or some other distribution, and what is the mean, standard deviation, all the statistical parameters. Correlation is another very commonly used statistical method. You find what is the correlation between variables, which gives you some information about how the variables are related. You're also learning about some relationship between data points. Okay, so these are the supervised and unsupervised learning techniques. A little more into clustering. The purpose of clustering is to group data points that are similar. There are no labels assigned to the data points. You have just data points, just like you try to identify the number of clusters in the data which I have given. The machine has to group together the data points that are similar and find out what are these clusters. And the way it works is each point is assigned to a cluster based on its distance to the cluster. There are many ways in which you can define the distance. You can define the distance to the center point of the cluster, or it can be to the closest point in the cluster. So there are different ways in which you can do it. But given a point, we can calculate the distance to all the clusters and you assign that point to one of the clusters with the minimum distance. So this is how the clustering algorithm works. And what you can do with this cluster, experts can look at the cluster and see whether there is any meaning to this cluster. Does it make sense? Why should there be clusters in the data? It's a question which experts can only answer. So you need to interpret these clusters and see whether there is any meaning to what the machine has done. And just like in the case of supervised learning, you can do some kind of a prediction. When you get a new test point, a new data point, we can find out which cluster that belongs to. So you compute the distance to every cluster and say, okay, this point belongs to this cluster. Once we are able to identify which cluster that point belongs to, we can transfer some of the knowledge about that cluster into the new data point. So these clusters might have some common characteristics, and you can expect the new point also to have similar characteristic because it belongs to the same cluster. We say birds of the same feather flock together, right? It's that kind of situation. When you get a new data point, we find out to which cluster it belongs to, and we use information, general knowledge about that cluster to make some inferences about that point. By the way, this is something which human beings do all the time. Lot of biases in our judgment comes from this form of clustering which we do. We group people into the language, the region, religion, and so on, and we have stereotypical inferences about each of these groups. So he said that, oh, they belongs to that group, is like that. This is something very common in human beings. And whether it's good or bad, we are trying to do the same thing in computers also, trying to group together data points. When you're on the internet, this is something Google does all the time. It tries to create a profile of you, try to group you into one of the categories, and then says, okay, this is a high spending group. So he's likely to buy expensive things. So you show advertisements about very expensive things. So they are able to exploit information about you using techniques like clustering. Okay, I've taken an example to illustrate what we can do with clustering. This is also inspired by a real the case study. One of my students worked in the Kannur International Airport project by L&T, and she collected data about the productivity rates. So a number of contractors were given the contract for excavation for the Kannur Airport. So we have all this data, and I've cleaned up the data, I've messed up the data just to make sure it is different. And I didn't want to use the same the data which is the property of the company. So I have cleaned up the data a little bit. So it's not the exact data, but it's inspired by a real case study. So for 30 days in a month, I have plotted the excavation in meter cube done by different contractors. There are different groups of contractors. So you can see the plot, the versus for each day, what is the excavation done by different contractors. Now, we will do this exercise, similar exercise. Are there clusters in the data? How many clusters are there? If you think there is a cluster, and then identify what are the characteristic features of each cluster. So students who don't have any experience in practical construction may not be able to answer it so much, but those with a little bit of experience can think about this question, why should there be clusters in the data from a project management viewpoint. So whether you have experience or not, I want you to think and come up with some answers and tell me whether you think there is any reason for the presence of clusters in this data from a project management viewpoint. So this is the next exercise. I'll give you some time to complete this. As the same question, how many clusters are there? What are the characteristic feature of each cluster? If you think there are clusters in this data, and what is the reason for the presence of clusters from a project management viewpoint? You complete this, and after this, we take a 20-minute break.
Sir, since all the contractors are in same color, we cannot categorize like who is who, right? Like how do we identify the clusters in this case?
Yeah, I have not given information about the contractor. So that information is not available to you. But you need to do the clustering based on the parameters which I have given you. That is the productivity rate, that excavation rate, and the day, whether you can form clusters using these two parameters without looking at some underlying characteristics of these data points, which we don't know. In many the application, the situation is like this. There are a lot of variables which are not available to you. And there are certain variables which you can measure and you can plot and you can make use clustering and other techniques based on this. But we may not be able to understand the underlying process for these formation of clusters and so on. So exactly the same here. I've given you only two parameters based on which you form the clusters. But once you form the clusters, I want you to think and find out why there can be different clusters in the data. Okay.
Here on the same day there are multiple points, so that is representing different people doing it, right?
That airport, that area is divided into number of sectors, and each sector is given to a different contractor.
Okay.
So that's why on the same day you have a number of data points.
Okay, sir. Okay, got it.
More workers are deployed, which increases the management cost. They can think about how to reduce the management cost here.
Tell me again, I didn't understand.
In the management perspective, they have deployed more workers, it seems, and they are not having any uniform pattern of style of carrying the excavating work. So which
Right.
this seems to be having the workers are not actually uniformly carrying the work.
Right. So that is one aspect. There are a lot of other reasons also. We'll see some of the answers. Let me see. People are able to find other reasons. There are many possible reasons why you have this kind of variation. Everybody does not have the same productivity. Every company does not have the same productivity rate. So we'll see. So what you said is correct. There are differences between workers and all that, but there are other reasons also from the project management viewpoint. We'll see that when we look at the answers which you have given. So I'm going to stop here. So we'll have a 20-minute break. And after we come back at 11 o'clock Indian time, we'll have a case study. One of my students is going to present a case study on the use of machine learning for activity recognition. So that will be about some half an hour or so. And then after that, we'll continue. Okay, so I'm stopping now.